What is up, Pitcher List family? Welcome to another episode of Hacks and Jacks, episode number 142, Spring Observations. My name is Brett Ford. I'm your host. And as always, I am here with senior analyst Scott Chu. Scott, how are things? We have baseball this week, buddy.
We sure do. There's baseball on the night that this comes out. So very exciting. Also, the day that this comes out. So just so you all know, I'm doing one more update to my hitter ranks. So it'll be sort of the bridge between the first official hitter list, which will be a week from the day this comes out, Wednesday. That'll be the first official hitter list, but I'll launch sort of a pre-start of the season update just before that. And then also this coming Friday is the first AMA with myself and Nate Schwartz, who was on the show last week.
We're kicking into high gear here, man. It's upon us finally. No more talk about draft season. I have all but one drafts completed. I'm waiting on one league that does a delayed draft for a balanced fantasy season. I don't really get it, but whatever, man. I got one more draft left. I'm thrilled to be done with the rest of them. How about you?
It's nice to switch gears to an actual roster, not what a roster might become.
Well, speaking of that, let's talk about maybe some of the guys who are on that roster who might be sitting out to begin the year. Let's jump to news and notes. We'll start with injuries. Miami Marlins outfielder Kyle Stowers will start the year on the IL with a lower body injury. We're looking at 3 to 4 weeks. And I don't know. What do you look at in Miami? Maybe Owen Cassie?
Sure. Who cares? I mean, not who cares necessarily. So, the guy who's actually going to get they got a couple guys who might get some extra playing time out of this, like Christopher Morel. Who cares? Griffin Conine. Who cares? I'm really, Owen Casey. Maybe, he'll get some playing time. Heriberto Hernandez who was like okay at the end of last season. He'll platoon in. This is NL only stuff. You don't really care, even in like a 15 team league, like an NFBC style league, you don't really care about the fallout because no single player is getting all this time, right? That's kind of the key, because no single player is getting all the time. None of these guys are good enough in a platoon to really roster. And even with full time, they would have been fringe worthy. So now it's like, meh, doesn't really matter. And it doesn't really change the batting order much, right? It's still Marcy, Edwards, Ramirez, and then who cares?
Yeah, and that's kind of my thoughts as well. Griffin Conine might be interesting if he were to get full-time at bats, but that's just not going to be the case. Let's move on. We'll stay in the NL East. Mike Tachman suffers a knee injury. This one might be somewhat consequential for fantasy.
So Tachman goes down, and I thought that Carson Benj was going to make the roster anyway, right? What Tachman's injury does is really just ensure he makes it, right? Benj was a guy we've been looking at all offseason to say, hey, he could get in. I think he'll be a platoon bat in this lineup. And really, Tachman is really just a way to talk about how is this Mets roster going to play out, especially the back half of it, right? I think we're real sure about the first 4 guys, Lindor, Soto, Bichette, and Polanco, although it's worth noting that Polanco over the last 9 seasons has only played 120 games or more 4 times, right? And actually, yeah. So, and one of those seasons is 2020, so it doesn't count, but still it's about half, right? So half the times he's played 120 games or more and half the time he hasn't. So while he is locked into first base, that could get a little up in the air, right? Which is sort of weird because it like that. If Polanco were to go down, I think it's actually Vientos that would go and play first base. But yeah, so back out of the line, I think as long as Luis Robert Jr. is healthy, he will be the center fielder. He's great defensively. He's just hurt all the time. So that's the first 5. After that, you've got Baty, Semien, Benj, and Alvarez. So Brett Baty is interesting. However, he's going to DH right now. And I think he'll get, with Polanco not being great against right-handers, like he's fine, but he's not great. And the other guys all on the bench are basically all like right-handed or not hitters like Vidal Brujan. Baty should get time against all of the right-handed pitching. He'll find a way in, right? He'll either they'll shuffle some guys around and Polanco will get a day off. Maybe Semien, who, for so long was a volume workhorse, last year he missed about, 20 something games. And he's 35 and a half years old, Semien. So I wouldn't be shocked if maybe he gets a little bit of a breather against right-handers. He's not like the offensive force he used to be anyway. So between like that and just the DH slot, Baty should play most of the week. So more than enough in like a 15 team league to be like worthy of being on your bench, a guy to keep an eye on, especially again, Baty's got to get the ball in the air. If he gets the ball in the air, he's an interesting player. If he doesn't, he's not. So he'll get that opportunity. I think Mark Vientos, who is a guy that I ranked him and Baty together, kind of wondering how this all would play out. Vientos is basically going to fall off the ranks entirely because even if he finds time, it's only against left-handed pitching as a DH, unless something were to happen to Polanco. And even then, I'm not sure Vientos would get all the playing time there. I wouldn't be shocked if they were like, hey, can anyone else also play first and see if we can keep Baty in the lineup or something like that. So I think Vientos is going to fall off my ranks entirely, like barely in the top 300 because he needs something to happen to even be interesting as a bench guy. But yeah. So Benj, who's sort of the focus here, he's a solid hitter. He's not the caliber of prospect like the other guys we'll talk about in the rest of this show. He doesn't have he's not an elite power guy. He's not an elite speed guy. He's not an elite hit tool guy. He's pretty good at all those things, but he's not great. I think Benj, if he were to play like a full season, this is a guy who could maybe go like 15 home runs, 15 stolen bases with like a 250 average. That'd be a really good season for him. I don't think he's going to get quite that much opportunity, but he could do enough to get double digits in home runs and stolen bases. I think the counting stats will be okay, but he's going to be in the bottom third of this lineup. So Benj is someone that, kind of worth keeping an eye on, but not expecting huge power here. Not expecting huge steals. He's someone that can do a little bit as like a fifth outfielder in a 15-teamer.
Perfect. We'll move on to another log jam that's thinning out here in the AL East. Tampa Bay Rays middle infielders Gavin Lux and Taylor Walls are both going to begin the season on the IL. So the middle infield race in Tampa Bay thins out a little bit. But we still have Carson Williams. We have Richie Palacios, who looks like he'll make the opening day roster. And then we have Ben Williamson, who came over from, I believe, it Seattle or Cincinnati. Either way, he comes over to Tampa Bay to kind of clog things up too. Are any of them fantasy relevant?
So, Williamson does make the roster. I think he's a bench guy in the very classic Tampa Bay sense, which means he's not interesting for fantasy. He's also not a guy who really profiles that well for fantasy baseball purposes, but he's a classic Ray in that he doesn't strike out a ton and he's really good defensively at multiple positions. So that's what Williamson does. It's one of those, I hate this phrase, but, he's a better real life player because he's a defender, right? He's a speedy defender. So Williamson should be off your radar for fantasy. Palacios is a guy who we've seen as a streamer here and there. He's got a little bit of speed. He stole 19 bases back in 2024, playing about half a season, but the bat isn't very good. Don't be fooled by the 48 game sample that we saw last year where he had these great numbers. I don't believe any of that. He didn't really the expected stats were fine, but he's a very average hitter. Palacios, he's got some contact ability, but there's not enough power here to be interesting. And the speed won't really matter unless Palacios is playing every single day near the top of the order. And he's not going to, that's just not going to happen. He's more likely to bat somewhere in the bottom half, and he's going to get platooned with, Williamson and Velody and all the other guys that they keep on this roster. I think, Carson Williams is the one who could be interesting for fantasy in Tampa Bay. We talked about him earlier. He's going to be the starting shortstop. He's ready for this in a sense. His spring was okay, right? The result, he didn't show a ton of power. He didn't walk at all, but he didn't strike out every single time, right? That was the key. So Carson Williams struck out 41% of the time last year in the majors in 106 plate appearances. He struck out 34% of the time in AAA. Those are scary numbers, folks. The zone contact especially was something that really jumped out. last season, so it was 72.8%. There's nobody in the majors that concede with a number that low, right? Like Rafael Devers has done it, right? But also like this is not a Rafael Devers bat. So Carson Williams showed better zone contact this spring. Again, it's a super small sample against guys not necessarily caring all that much about whether they get him out, but Carson Williams showed a little bit better there. And as a full season guy, he could go like 2020. It could be a very like Anthony Volpe like 2020. If you remember from Anthony Volpe's rookie season, it's 2020 with like bad counting stats and bad ratios, but it's still 2020, right? That's the kind of guy Carson Williams can be, but he'll need to like to even get a shot at that. He's going to need to keep that strikeout rate down low enough. You know, and again, the return of Taylor Walls, Tampa loves Taylor Walls because he's a really good defender, right? He's really, really good defensively. So they like him. Carson Williams can hold them off if he hits at all, because Taylor Walls does not. He doesn't hit at all. So that's the way he keeps that job and has a chance to get to 2020, 20 home runs, 20 steals. But Carson Williams' biggest threat is himself, and it's that strikeout rate.
Let's take a look at one more injury. We talked about this guy last week as someone that, we were high on coming into draft season, but Seiya Suzuki is going to begin the year on the IL. Just a little extra time to recover from the injury he sustained in the World Baseball Classic. So that opens up some time in the Cubs outfield, and three names that used to be interesting for fantasy once upon a time probably aren't anymore. Michael Conforto, Dylan Carlson, and Scott Kingery?
Scott Kingery. Good for you, bud. Like making a team, you know? Scott Kingery's been around for a long, long time. He got called up way back in 2018 with the Phillies. He even had a decent season back in 2019, and then you haven't heard from him since because he hasn't been good. And he's still not. As far as fantasy is concerned, you don't really care about Scott Kingery. He's going to be depth until they get some guys back because he can cover a lot of positions. The winner, so to speak, here is Michael Conforto. I think he's going to bat near the back of the, near the end of this lineup. Conforto, like, here's the thing with Conforto. If Conforto was going to be interesting for fantasy, it would have been last season because the Dodgers gifted him a job, put him in a decent spot in the lineup, and he had every opportunity to be a guy, and he wasn't. He played more games than he'd played in a single season since 2019, played 138 games, and he hit 12 home runs and hit 199, right? Like Michael Conforto just doesn't really, and I don't, he's one of these guys that I just don't care about his spring numbers because he's 33 years old. There's nothing the spring is going to tell me about this guy. There's not, I don't care if, he had a swing change. I don't care about any of that. Michael Conforto just doesn't do what he needs to do to be interesting anymore. He's never been a guy who hit the ball like super duper hard. He's got, a slightly above average barrel rate, but it's not enough. He hits too many balls in the air, like up the middle and the other way. He doesn't have any like standout skill. He's not fast. So unfortunately, you're just going to kind of have to wait for Suzuki to come back to get, for anything to be interesting there. And no one else really gets anything. Dylan Carlson also was once a prospect for the St. Louis Cardinals, and he's also not really a guy that we care about at all. He also had a good year back in like 2021, but yeah, it's not there. He's a decent defender. That's about it. And he'll get to play a little bit for no particular reason, just to give guys an off day, or maybe because there's a lefty, because Michael Conforto will never see the diamond against lefties. So yeah, all that talk to say nothing. There's no opportunity for Matt Shaw either. He was the guy that might have been interesting if they were like, well, let's let Matt Shaw do it. They decided not to. So he remains kind of uninteresting. I know he had 13 home runs and 17 stolen bases last year, Matt Shaw, but he's just not going to get that shot. He didn't win a first base job. He didn't win an outfield job. So now he's just going to be a bench guy extraordinaire.
When I saw the Suzuki news, I was really hopeful, and maybe this was just blind optimism, that the Cubs might call up Kevin Alcantara. But it looks like we won't see him for at least a couple of months.
Well, they got to see what they have in Scott Kingery.
Wow, that sounds like a Rockies mentality there, if you ask me, but it is what it is.
That's a
Let's
meme.
move on to call ups and demotions. A couple of surprises both ways as we open the season, looking at opening day rosters. We'll start with the bad news. Washington Nationals outfielder Dylan Cruz demoted to AAA. He will begin the season in the minors. What does that do for you? I mean, how soon should we expect Cruz back in the majors? How much does this tank his fantasy value?
As soon as he hits, I guess, right? He actually didn't hit that well in AAA last year. Granted, he wasn't there for very long. To me, so the Nationals roster isn't exactly like full of talent. It's not as though he's competing against a bunch of other like star outfielders, right? Jacob Young is a good defensive center fielder, so he'll probably stay there. They've got James Wooden left, Dalen Lylan, right? So they're all pretty good. But there should have been a spot on this team somewhere, right? And I guess they decided there isn't one. Uh, but yeah, Dylan Cruz will probably stay down there. He's right-handed, so if he did get called up, he'd probably be on the short side of a platoon to start. But I guess we might see him in May, maybe a little earlier if he shows that he can hit or if there's an injury. But all the upside. Well, I shouldn't say all the upside in the world. There's 15 home run, 20 stolen base upside, right? Maybe 15-25 if he played like starting in like mid-April and was okay, but it kills his fantasy value for now because it's hard to see a path again unless someone gets hurt. The main spot, honestly, I thought that might still be available is DH, right? Like, I don't think most people could name the DH for the Nats, including Nats fans, could name the DH for the Nats. They've had a couple guys they've thought about. Former Baltimore Oriole Joey Weimer is on that team. Andres Chaparro, but it's actually right now Jorbit Vivas is the guy who they currently say might be it. And it's not like, again, he didn't have a good spring. Like the Nationals acquired him like 3 days ago for a minor league pitcher, right? From the Yankees. So there's an opportunity for Cruz to potentially become the DH if he shows he can hit at all. It'll probably not be full-time at bats. And in a 12-teamer, Cruz has just got to completely fall off your board. He's not really someone, to tease a later segment. He's not someone that's going to be on my watch list unless he starts doing things, but he doesn't get there yet. Losing that job was big because it also tells me that you would think the Nats would want nothing but for the 24-year-old Dylan Cruz to like show something. Dude just turned 24. They're a young team. They want to know what they've got. And they're like, we don't need to see him right now. That's a big deal.
Yeah, that's wild. For me, it's an endorsement of Dalen Lyle. The fact that he has surpassed Cruz on the depth chart, I think, is noteworthy at least. And I'm hoping it's more of an endorsement of Lyle than an indictment on Cruz, but has yet to be seen. And when you mentioned Nats DHs, I was waiting for you to drop the name Joey Meneses from the previous World Baseball Classic, who popped off and I think earned an opening day roster spot in like 2024.
Oh yeah, Joey Meneses. He's still around. He's in the minor leagues for Oakland right now. The late bloomer.
Fascinating. Yeah, he was like 30 years old when he got that job. That's crazy.
Yep.
Let's move on to the Los Angeles Dodgers position battle going on there in their infield. And unfortunately for early season drafters, it's Hyesong Kim getting sent to AAA. Alex Freeland wins the Dodgers' second base job for opening day, or at least a share of it. He'll be on the opening day roster. He's not fantasy relevant, right, Scott?
Nope. Going to bat near the bottom of this lineup. I think he's going to platoon. Strikeouts were a bit of a problem last season. We saw him for 97 plate appearances. He struck out in a bunch of them, over 30% of them. He doesn't hit the ball particularly hard. Didn't hit the ball particularly hard this spring. In fact, he didn't really hit it all this spring. He hit 111 with a 52 WRC plus this spring. So no real reason to think that there's anything to expect for Alex Freeland. I think they gave him this job, but it doesn't really, for fantasy, we're just waiting for Edman to come back. And I think Freeland probably falls off the roster when that happens.
And we'll move on to the last and probably most impactful demotion to begin the season. Pittsburgh Pirates shortstop slash outfielder slash super prospect. Konnor Griffin was sent to AAA to begin the year. Not entirely surprising, despite the hype that he got in like the first week of spring training. Where does that leave his fantasy value entering the year, Scott?
I don't think it changes, right? I think, I don't think anybody truly thought that the only way that he was going to get a starting spot was if Konnor Griffin signed a contract. If he signed like an 8-year extension or something like that, then we'd see Konnor Griffin. That's probably like the carrot that the Pirates have been dangling for Konnor Griffin, saying like, well, if you sign a contract, you're in right away. Now I think, so the whole structure right now with call-ups is, we used to always wait for Super 2. Maybe they do that with a player with a player of Konnor Griffin's caliber. There's one other thing, whereas if he wins Rookie of the Year, the Pirates would get an additional first round pick as long as he qualified. To qualify, he'll basically need to play in about 120 games. It's hard. There's not an exact game counter. You have to appear in a certain percentage of your team's games. Actually, sorry, you have to have a certain number of your team's games with plate appearances, blah, 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 blah. But you get to about 120, you should qualify. So, unless it's like a pinch hit situation. So I think he'll be back. I think he'll be up late April, early May. And if it's not, then you got to wait for Super 2, which I think is later on in May. That number also changes every year because it's based on like average service time or something like that. So that's when, but again, his fantasy value for Konnor Griffin, nothing changes, folks. Nothing changes. I still think he's got a very reasonable shot at playing 120 games, which is what you probably should have been counting on. My ranking of him, which is, further down than it was in like NFBC drafts and all that stuff. It's further down, but I had him ranked where I was like, I think he'll play about 120 games. So that all stays the same. I still think he can go like 15 home runs, 30 stolen bases with surprisingly good ratios for a rookie. I think that's all there for Konnor Griffin. I think if someone's cutting him, you should scoop him. Even if you don't necessarily have a stash spot, unless your bunches are super, super tight, this is one of the few caliber, especially with the guys that are getting called up. Very few players in 12-team leagues are really worthy of stashing. Konnor Griffin is one of them. He's the best prospect in all of baseball, and he's got tools out the wazoo. He can do it all. Like even if he doesn't hit home runs right away, he could steal elite stolen bases right away. Like he stole 65 bases last year as a 19-year-old across, from low A to double A. He did it all while hitting like 300 something, right? And it was like 122 games, 65 stolen bases. The dude can run. He can flat out run. Don Kelly's probably not going to hold him back too much. They'll let him go. So yeah, I still think he can get to 120 games. I still think he should be rostered in every league.
Well, that's actually a relatively positive spin on him getting sent down. So that transitions us well to the good news. We've got a couple of guys who are going to be opening the season on their team's roster. JJ Wetherholt, the St. Louis Cardinals middle infielder, will begin the year on their major league roster. And then the crown jewel, Scott, for you at least, Detroit Tigers infielder Kevin McGonigle on the opening day roster to begin the year in Detroit. Talk to me about those two and fantasy ramifications around them opening the season in the majors.
Yeah, let's start with JJ Wetherholt. There's a great piece by Andy Behrens who talks about him as just disgusting. He is the classic Cardinals pesky hitter. JJ Wetherholt doesn't have, this is not like an elite power bat. He hit the ball hard this spring. He hit the ball hard in AAA as well. Average exit velocity over 90 miles an hour. Barreled up several balls this spring as well, which is a good sign. But, he's mostly a line drive guy. At least he was in the majors or in the minors. So that's kind of what I expect in the majors as well. I think with JJ Wetherholt, you're going to get a guy who immediately in points leagues, he's probably like a candidate for points leagues rookie of the year, right? Because while I think McGonigle is better as a hitter, especially in terms of hit tool than Wetherholt, Wetherholt is going to lead off for the Cardinals. That's a huge deal, especially in points leagues. Again, both of them are guys that like walk as much as they strike out. Both of them around like 15% for both. Wetherholt is just, he's really, I think he's going to have very strong ratios right out of the gate. I think Wetherholt will do a bit of running as well. So I'd say a solid like projected line for Wetherholt for me is going to be, yeah, I think he keeps that job all year. So let's say like 15 home runs, 15 steals, maybe like 75 to 80 runs scored and hitting like, yeah, I think all the projections are too low. I think he can hit like 260, 270 with an OBP close to 350. So it's a very, very, very solid player in Wetherholt. I just don't think, again, those numbers, that 15 home runs, 15 steals, that's not going to jump off the page like some other guys can do, especially Konnor Griffin. So, he's got a bit more speed than McGonigle, who I'll talk about now. McGonigle probably had the best, he's one of the best hit tools in all the minor leagues. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Tigers guy. He's also got more power than Wetherholt has, not by a ton. Like he's not like a 30 home run guy anyway, but I think McGonigle stays the third baseman all year or somewhere in the infield all year. Third base is actually probably the most interesting place he could have gotten for fantasy. I thought he'd be a shortstop. I think a lot of people thought he'd be a shortstop, and that's cool. That's the eligibility he starts with, but he's going to gain that third base eligibility very quickly because he's going to be the third baseman right out of the gate. So with McGonigle, I think if he plays all season, I'd project something closer to like 20, let's say like 22 home runs and 10 stolen bases. The Tigers don't run much at all. AJ Hinch has never really been like a running guy. So I'd say that is probably where he'd be. And I also think the projection's too low. I think he'll hit like 265, but instead of 15-15, it's more like 20-10 for McGonigle over Wetherholt. And McGonigle has more long-term upside for me because I think that home run number could get even higher. The question is just, will he get enough balls in the air with power to the pull side? Something he did all throughout the minor leagues, but it's harder to do in the majors. I wouldn't be shocked if by next year we're talking about McGonigle as like a 25 home run guy with 10 stolen bases and a bunch of counting stats. I wish he was leading off. If he was leading off, I'd clearly want him over Wetherholt in every format right now, but he's not. So I think in points leagues, you might slightly favor Wetherholt for that lineup spot, but that's how close it is between the two of them right now. But long-term, it's McGonigle.
So as we speak, Wetherholt and McGonigle are projected to finish 28th and 33rd, respectively, in the shortstop points league ranks. They're down in the late 20s, early 30s as far as positional ranks. Do you think either one or both could finish
in a points
to the
league?
Top 15?
Yeah, in a points league, that's the wrong spot, right? So in a points league, especially today, right? Like, so one of the reasons they'll be down was like there was some question over volume, those kinds of things. I think if you're in a points league right now and you're looking for upside, both these guys can probably finish somewhere in the top 15 at shortstop. But keep in mind, shortstop is crazy deep, right? Like when I say shortstop 15, that's where like Willie Adames and CJ Abrams and Geraldo Perdomo and Jeremy Pena, that's still that's a top 75 hitter. Like that's really to say like these guys could be top 10 to 15 shortstops. That's telling you there's a huge ceiling in points leagues because of the way they play, right? Like they've got, especially if there's like a strikeout penalty, they could absolutely fall into that 10 to 15 range, right? Now in standard leagues, it's going to be lower than that simply because there's a lot of competition and neither of them are going to like blow you out of the water with some of the stats that they can provide. And there's some uncertainty, those kinds of things. But I think in a standard league, it's more like 15 to 20, which again, my 20th ranked shortstop is, in my last update, is Ezekiel Tovar, overall hitter 109. So we're talking about a high level of player. And that's what we mean when we say like shortstop is deep, right? Because like Xavier Edwards is my 21st. You're still in the top 120 if you're at shortstop number 22, right? It's super deep, but they have upside to move up a lot higher.
Yeah, I actually, in my points league that I just drafted, I took Ernie Clement super late in the draft just because of the positional flexibility. But I see that McGonigle is on the wire here. So definitely going to be scooping him up instead of Clement just because the ceiling is so much higher.
Yeah, and when we're talking about points league with the strikeout penalty, right? Like I'll instantly take them over Colson Montgomery, Dansby Swanson, Willie Adames is starting to get close because he strikes out quite a bit. That those are all guys in the top 20. I think that could fall out for those guys to move in. Another guy who moves up in that format is also Jacob Wilson, who might be even cheaper than all of them. but he's also tailor-made for points leagues. But yeah, so that's kind of where we are with those guys. And in standard leagues, it's probably more like the 15 to 20 range at shortstop. Third base is a bit more interesting because when I talked about like if you're shortstop number 20, you're still in like the top 110. Third baseman number 20 is Willie Castro at 144. So
My
when he gets
God.
that third base eligibility, yeah, I mean, I can't do a podcast now without mentioning Willie Castro, even though I didn't plan on it. There it is, right? My third base number 20 is Willie Castro. That's like a barely a top 150 hitter, and there's that huge cliff at third base. So I think if McGonigle, if you're thinking about him as your third baseman, I think you put him right there with like Alec Boehm, Caleb Durbin, Kazuma Okamoto, Royce Lewis. I've got all those guys really, really tight together. I think you can put McGonigle right there in a points league. He can move up quite a bit as well, just because, I mean, some of these guys are decent for points leagues, but like Munetaka Murakami is really not great for a strikeout penalty points league. So he falls out, he's number 10. He falls way down. I think you could start seeing McGonigle push up there as well.
Beautiful. Well, that wraps news and notes. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about some spring observations and drop some names that are on Scott's watch list entering the season. Welcome back to Hacks and Jacks. I'm Brett Ford here with Scott Chu. We're talking hitters on Pitcher List. And Scott, we are basically done spring training. Teams are in their home cities wrapping up preseason and exhibition games. And we have real baseball beginning, if you're listening on the day this drops, tonight, Wednesday night, with the Yankees and Giants in primetime before real opening day. I'm going to call it real opening day still on Thursday, where pretty much almost all the teams are taking part in the action. A lot of stuff happened this spring, a lot of stuff that is just noise. So how do you sort through kind of what matters and what doesn't in spring training? And what are some of the things that caught your eye?
Yeah, with spring training, first of all, what we care about is guys who don't have a lot of major league experience winning jobs or winning better spots in the lineup. So I'm not going to do like the tired old thing of like, these are guys that were good in spring training last year and you don't care, because some of those guys did end up being good, not because of spring training, but like, do you know who had the number 1 WRC plus in spring training in 2025? I bet you don't, but it was Pete Crow Armstrong. Pete Crow Armstrong was the best hitter in all of spring training, and he carried that right into the season. Number 3 hitter was a guy who I think won people a lot of leagues at catcher. Number 3 by WRC plus in 2025, Hunter Goodman. Hunter Goodman. Here's the problem. Number 4 was also Curtis Mead, who basically got kicked off his own team. Like they traded away for nothing. Right. So most of the top 10, you don't really care about. It just didn't work out very well. Right. Like no one cares that Ty France had a good spring in 2025. Brandon Drury had a good spring in 2025. Nobody cares. Alejandro Osuna had a good spring. He was young even. No one cares. It's all about young guys who haven't played a ton, maybe showing us something winning jobs. So Pete Crow Armstrong won himself, like really solidified his job last spring. Hunter Goodman really solidified his job last spring. That matters. Right. Even Ellie De La Cruz having a good spring last year didn't matter quite so much. Now, granted, he actually started out the year quite well too, which is cool. But even like he showed amazing plate discipline in the spring and it didn't matter, right? They don't always carry this stuff because it's just a different game. You don't play spring training games to win the games. So when you change that motive of why you're playing, it changes a lot about how the results go. So to carry that into 2026, who are the top performers in spring, right? Well, it turns out the top 4 performers are all guys that it just does not matter, right? Jake Bowers, Matt McLean, Mike Yastrzemski, and Teoscar Hernandez are the 4 top performers in spring, and I don't care. It just doesn't matter. None of these guys have really changed what their job's going to be. Like Mike Yastrzemski is now closer to a starter than he was, but it has nothing to do with his spring performance and everything to do with the guy ahead of him getting banned for the season, right? Like that's what that is. So yeah, the spring performances that do, I'll talk a little bit about the spring performances that do matter to me, right? And I think the number 1 is Chase DeLauter, who's getting quite a bit of helium this spring. Chase DeLauter is, left-hander for the Guardians. He's an outfielder. I'm not I'm still not sure this has won him necessarily like a full everyday role, even though it probably should, because the Guardians are desperate for hitters, but it should win Chase DeLauter a everyday lineup spot. And I think he could move close to like the middle of the order, right? Because other than Steven Kwan, who's definitely the leadoff guy, and Jose Ramirez, who's definitely going to bat third, the entire rest of this lineup is up for grabs, right? Their number 2 hitter is Angel Martinez, and he slaps the ball around, but he's not very good. Kyle Manzardo is someone this team is always trying to platoon and is very streaky. So he's right now their number 4 hitter. That position, like you could slide up ahead of Manzardo. Right now, their number 5 hitter is Rhys Hoskins, right? Who is Rhys Hoskins, right? There's no reason this team is going to say, oh no, this has to be our number 5 guy. If he's not hitting, he'll move down. So Chase DeLauter could find himself batting 4th or 5th in short order. I think again, he's made it so this team probably shouldn't platoon him right out of the gate. I think that there are other opportunities to platoon guys, and the bench guys, like the guys that would platoon in this lineup, are also left-handed. So like their bench is left-handed except for David Fry and Austin Hedges, neither of whom can play the outfield. So yeah, I think Chase DeLauter is someone who is now much more interesting. He's a watch list guy in like 12 teamers, maybe as like a free scoop. If you had like, 1 or 2 guys move to the IL and you want to carry an extra outfielder, especially in like a 5 outfield league, you could do that. He's someone that's going to move up. He wasn't even, he wasn't really in my rankings very high. And I think he's going to get an opportunity to move much higher. So Chase DeLauter, yeah, that is a name that really stands out in this last spring training. And I think, I really want to say that Shea Langeliers' spring matters. He's had a very good spring and he's kept the strikeout rate below 20%. The problem is, when I looked historically about people carry, I wish I could give you like a beautiful number to really summarize this. I would have been worried if Shea Langeliers struck out a ton this spring, because that would have been a very bad sign. The fact that he didn't strike out much this spring suggests maybe he continues to carry it into next season or into this coming season, right? He finished last season with a sub 20% strikeout rate. If that's the Shea Langeliers we get, then he's probably the number 2 catcher, period. Right. But we don't know if that's going to be the case yet. And I'm not willing to say the spring is definitely a sign, because we've seen other guys have good plate discipline in the spring just to lose it when they go and face extended bouts of good pitching. So I'm mentioning Shea Langeliers simply because we didn't get a bad sign, and I guess that's a good sign, right? So that was one that I kind of liked. It's nice seeing Austin Riley look healthy, right? Like he's 29. I don't care about his spring performance so much, other than like he looks healthy, which is good. I think if you're a dynasty person, Leo DeVries or Leo DeVries, I apologize, I don't know that one. He had an amazing spring, 50 plate appearances, 208 WRC plus. The plate discipline was strong. He's with the Athletics. I don't think he's going to debut this season. Maybe he does in like September, but starting next season, I think that's a guy who, we're talking about a top 10 overall prospect. He'll probably be one of the biggest names that we're talking about next spring training. So obviously he wasn't going to be cheap in Dynasty anyway, but you really like seeing that performance from Leo DeVries. And finally, I think I kept an eye on a guy who everyone keeps asking me about, and it's Josh Smith. And so Josh Smith has won himself a job, right? Josh Smith appears to be a starter for the Rangers, and spring, I guess, is the reason for that. But I want to say something very important about Josh Smith, because I keep getting asked, oh, is he someone interesting in the back end? It's not like this dude didn't have a job before. This guy played 149 and then 144 games each of the last 2 seasons, and he was as boring each time, right? Like last season, he even got to lead off quite a bit. If Josh Smith, and you'll hear me say this quite a bit in the spring, I said it earlier about Michael Conforto. If Josh Smith was going to be interesting, it was going to be last season, because he had a chance to lead off. He played all the time, and he brought good plate discipline. Everything was there, and he just wasn't interesting because he doesn't hit the ball hard enough. Like it's barely double digit strikeouts, barely double digit. It's barely double digit. Like the strikeouts are fine, but it's like barely double digit home runs, barely double digit stolen bases. He only had 35 RBI because he was hitting leadoff a lot last year. He played half his games in the leadoff spot. It's just, yeah, he's just not there. And now he's going to be at the bottom of the lineup. So again, it's really hard to be excited about Josh Smith. Even though he had a great spring, even though he was walking more, even though blah, 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 it doesn't matter, right? He won a job. That's interesting. And that's about it. And my last point on spring is just to remember for everybody that like, this is like a bad 35 to 50 game sample, right? And when I say a bad sample, what I mean is it's hard to get a ton of meaning in it because the quality of opponent is way down, right? So like, is it cool that Brett Baty had a strong spring? Like, sure, it's cool. I love seeing that the strikeouts were way down. I love that he barreled the crap out of the ball and hit it hard because I'd rather him have a good spring than a bad one. I like that he had a sub 40% ground ball rate, Brett Baty, in spring, right? But he had a 35.7% line drive rate. It's not as though Baty was hitting the ball in the air. He was just getting it slightly further away from the ground, right? That to me says, oh, he had a random sample, right? He still hit and he also hit like everything the other way. Like that's a really good example of like, oh yeah, these are cool spring stats, but like there's a lot of things going on under the hood that are not going to continue, right? He's not going to hit 35.7% line drives. Nobody does that. Nobody. Luis Vries doesn't do that, right? That's not possible, right? Major league hitters just can't do that. He's not going to continue to strike out 13.5% of the time. I mean, it'd be cool if he did, but he won't. So make sure you're taking these like big improvements with a grain of salt, even though it's a decent sample to say, oh, this could be sticky. It is true that 50 plate appearances is pretty good for like strikeout rate, walk rate, a couple other stats, but that's in regular games where pitchers are trying to win games. In the spring, it's not the same. I would venture a guess to say that stats are way more random in the spring. So as much as I'd love to say like, oh, really keep an eye on the strikeout rates, look for bad strikeout rates. That's a concern, but good strikeout rates kind of like don't give you the same positive punch because you're like, okay, that's what I wanted to see. Better than having a bad strikeout rate, but it's not the same as showing me a good strikeout rate in the majors for a month.
We talked about a lot of stats that are not sticky. One of the stats that we discussed as something that could correlate to real production during the regular season was stolen bases. And just a couple of guys that I saw that kind of surprised me, kind of popped off the page a little bit as far as stolen bases in the spring. Matt Shaw with 7. I know we discussed his playing time issues in Chicago, but the fact that he's running when he gets on base is at least a little bit encouraging if he does end up by injury or by performance inheriting a full-time role. And then the other one is a guy we talked about at length last episode with Nate Schwartz, and that's Sal Stewart. Stewart stole 4 bases this spring. And it's just something that I wasn't necessarily expecting out of his profile. Maybe I should have been more optimistic on his steals projections, but he showed a little bit of speed, and that was encouraging. I know we love Sal Stewart on this podcast, so to see him steal bases.
Yeah, so just because he did steal 4 bases in 57 plate appearances, I'm not ready to say like, oh, let's extrapolate that out and turn it into 40, right? That's probably not it, but I feel like his odds of getting double digit steals are a lot higher than I thought, a couple weeks ago. So that's a plus, right? And again, so Jason Collette has done some work on this and said there's a little bit of stickiness to spring stolen base tendencies, right? Managers run in the spring the way they kind of want to run in the season. They still they sort of call the run game the same way. So I think, if you're, the Rockies have never been a big stolen base team, but it looks like they're going to let Jake McCarthy run, right? So he stole 6 bases this spring. They'll let him run. Seeing Matt Shaw run this spring just says, look, if he gets in the game, yeah, he's a stolen base threat, especially because I think they're realizing he's not that great of a hitter. So why not let him? I thought James Outman stealing 8 bases was kind of weird for Minnesota, but they're going to try anything to see what they can do to win a couple ball games because they claimed this is not purely a rebuild year and they're going to have to show something to make that true. So why not, give it a whirl. So And I mean, I think with the Cubs also, they showed a lot of aggression with several guys that I didn't expect. Like our boy Scott Kingery stole 5 bases this spring, right? So that tells us that the Cubs might be a little bit more ready to run than maybe they were in prior seasons. Even though it's like we didn't see a lot of it from Nico Horner, it was interesting to see some of their letting some of their young guys run. We'll see if they do that more in the back half of their lineup, especially early on while their bopper Seiya Suzuki is not in the lineup. I think they might try to run to win a couple games. That would be, that'd be a big plus just for the whole team as a fantasy, for fantasy. Again, the biggest thing with stolen bases is just, it's all about, it's sort of situational in game, but it's also really just managers, right? This is one of the few times that manager really makes a difference in whether or not a guy's going to do it. So like the Cubs ran quite a bit last year as well. So it's good to see that they're going to continue to do that. They've still got the same manager, so I don't know why it would be any different. But what I want is, Colorado is really low in that list, so we'll see if they run more. Like I talked about the Tigers, they stole the fewest bases last year, 61, right? For the entire season last year, that's not really going to change. Even if Parker Meadows plays more, getting 20 stolen bases for the Tigers is really hard because AJ Hinch doesn't run. Now he is very aggressive on the bases, but not with steals. He wants a guy to get to first. Like he pushes more than any other manager going from first to third on a batted ball, but he doesn't try to steal second very often. So, that's just the way that team is, right? I'm very interested to see if Washington goes back to being very aggressive. I'm interested to see if, Cincinnati gets back to being aggressive, although with Terry Francona, that's not very likely, but really keep an eye on, I think we can learn both from spring and from early in the season, some tendencies, what teams are running more that you can really carry through the rest of the season. Maybe not the player specifically, but from a team context, who's running. That'll be very interesting to watch early in the season.
Absolutely. Great points about spring training stats and observations. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk watch list players after this. Welcome back to Hacks and Jacks. I'm your host, Brett Ford, here with Scott Chu talking hitters on Pitcher List. We've got some guys for Scott's watch list. Just some names entering the season that may or may not have been drafted at the end of the late rounds of your draft. Some of them have piqued Scott's interest, and I think that they're worth keeping tabs on, putting that little flag indicator on these guys on whatever platform you're using. So, Scott, let's talk about your watch list and why you're interested in some of these names.
Yeah, let's start with a guy who is not like some young, exciting rookie, but a guy who I've seen on several wires in 12-team leagues. That's Andrew Vaughn. So Andrew Vaughn over in Milwaukee, he falls just inside my top 150 hitters. The reason I'm interested in him again is we saw him do some exciting things after he became a Brewer and got out of that heck hole that is the south side of Chicago. And it does look very much like Vaughn is going to get a chance to be the everyday first baseman. He's going to bat 6th in this lineup. He could even move up a little bit and overtake Sal Frelick to be hitting like 5th. There's not much going on in the lineup behind him, but Andrew Vaughn could, last year we saw this big surge of first basemen that, kind of took over in April, right? It was like the month of the first baseman that we saw Soderstrom and Torkelson all kind of break out for us a little bit. If that happens again this year, I would expect Andrew Vaughn to be on that list. So if you're feeling not super great about your first base situation, I think that's definitely one of the names I'd put very quickly on my list to say like, all right, let's see if Andrew Vaughn is someone that is worth, kind of worth watching. I really wanted to talk more about Issac Parades, but he got drafted like everywhere. And here's the thing. I think people are going to drop him. And the reason is because it looks like Jeremy Pena is going to be ready pretty much right out the gate. So with that in mind, there's this huge question mark of how does he play? How does Issac Parades play? Right? Like, I guess so Jeremy Pena did appear in a game. If he hits the IL, that means Paredes is going to be the everyday third baseman and they'll put Carlos Correa at shortstop. But the moment that Pena is ready, he comes back into play shortstop because he's an excellent defensive shortstop and Correa and Paredes are not. So then what happens? Right? I don't know. Like there's the DH spot is completely clogged by Yordan Alvarez and Paredes doesn't play the outfield. So we'll have to see if anything happens. There's not really a spot. Like Altuve's at second, Walker's at first. There's just not a lot of open spots. So if he gets cut, Issac Parades would then be on my watch list, but right now he's rostered in too many leagues. Now, if you want an Astro that is on my watch list, I've got two of them for you in the outfield. In shallower leagues, Cam Smith is probably out there, especially in those 3 outfield leagues. There was a ton of hype on this guy last year, and I was very cold on that. And this year I'm a little bit warmer, one, because I can get him off the waivers and not in like the starter rounds of my drafts. His spring was fine, right? He's had a fairly decent spring. But the biggest thing is just an opportunity. Cam Smith looks like he's going to be an everyday guy. I think he could totally be like a 15 to 20 home run, 10 stolen base guy who hits like 250, 260. That'd be better than any projection has on him right now. I think that is there. There's a reason the projections have him lower because it's certainly not a given, but I think Cam Smith could be that. If you're in a deeper league, I'm real interested to see what the Astros do with Joey Loperfido. So he's in the mix to start. Even if he doesn't get a 100% job, Loperfido is left-handed, so he should be pretty close to regular in that lineup. And there's still certainly like power here, right? The hit tool isn't as bad as we thought. So when he first came up with Houston, he just could not stop the strikeouts, but he brought them down quite a bit last year while he was with Toronto. I think the Astros can kind of keep that going. 104 plate appearances last year for Loperfido, and he hit 333, right? Obviously, I don't expect him to hit that well again, but I think if you're looking for a guy who, if he plays 120 games, could go 15 home runs, 10 stolen bases, okay counting stats, not good ratios, which is totally playable in a 15-team league or a very deep 12. Joey Loperfido is someone that I think you should be keeping an eye on early on to see how he plays. We already talked about Chase DeLauter. I think you should be ready to scoop him up. I think a guy who's getting cut all over the place, who still should play most days if you're in a deep league, is Colt Keith. So Colt Keith obviously is probably one of the big losers, quote unquote, of that news for, the Tigers keeping McGonigle. But with Colt Keith, we're still talking about a guy who's like a fairly touted prospect. I wouldn't be shocked if this dude against right-handed pitching is hitting like third for this team. Third, fourth, something like that. And it's not as though he, lost a job because he was bad. This was all about McGonigle winning a job because he was good, right? So Colt Keith had his moments last season for sure. He was pretty good during the summer. He had another kind of blip in August that he was interesting. Colt Keith was, once upon a time, a top 50-ish prospect who's got some pretty decent power, despite getting off to a slow start last year. There's no reason he couldn't be like a 20 home run hitter this year who hits 260, right? He could do that. I think that I know we've seen 2 seasons from him already where he only hit 13 home runs. There is another level in there for Colt Keith. We just haven't seen it yet. So he's definitely on my watch list in deep leagues, especially, and also because he's eligible all over the place, right? In every format, he should be eligible at both second and third. And in Yahoo leagues, he'll be eligible at first as well. So definitely another guy I'm keeping an eye on my watch list to see if he is, there's not a lot of guys on waivers who hit third for a good team, right? And Colt Keith might be one of those guys. So he's definitely someone I would have on my watch list right out of the gate. And then finally, a guy who I don't need to tell you a ton about him because you should know, but Tyler O'Neill's still healthy. And, I'm not sure the Orioles really care about preserving him all season long, but as of right now, he's going to bat 5th for this team and he's going to play every day until his body falls apart, which will probably happen pretty soon. But until that happens, Tyler O'Neill is still Tyler O'Neill. And what that means is sometimes he will be absolutely unrosterable, right? He'll just be one of the worst hitters in all of Major League Baseball. But the other times, he'll just hit a ton of home runs out of nowhere, right? Like this dude is a year removed from a 31 home run season. He did that in 2024 with Boston. I don't care that he had a strong spring with great plate discipline because he's old and that's what he should do in the spring. But I do care that he remains healthy. I do care that I think this team's going to bat him 4th quite a bit. He may sit some because this team is trying to squeeze guys in. And I think there's going to be even more pressure as someone like Jackson Holiday returns to the lineup. He's going to start on the IL, but he should be back fairly soon. That's probably more news for like Kobe Mayo and Blaze Alexander than it is for Tyler O'Neill. But, for now, Tyler O'Neill is a guy who I'm certainly watching. If he ends up being really bad, what would happen next is another guy I'm going to keep an eye on. So if Tyler O'Neill starts being really bad, Dylan Beavers is someone that would be on my watch list because that's how he gets playing time. He actually got to lead off a little bit towards the end of last year. Dylan Beavers is someone who he didn't walk at all this spring, which is kind of worrying because that's actually probably his primary skill is Dylan Beaver takes walks. But if he were to squeeze into that lineup, this is a dude that can hit 15 home runs and steal 15 bags and hit like 250. That's the type of thing that he can do if given a full-time role. I don't think he will, but if something were to happen to Tyler O'Neill, which it very often does, you have to remember that this guy, he hit 31 home runs, but that doesn't mean he played the whole season, right? He played 113 games back in 2024, and that's the most games he'd played since 2021. He's never played 140 games in his entire career. So his games played each of the last 4 seasons are 96, 72, 113, and 54. So Tyler O'Neill is not like the most durable dude. And if he goes down, Dylan Beavers would be the main beneficiary there. And I think that he could be very interesting, especially in like points leagues. If he keeps that strikeout rate down a little bit, and and in OBP leagues, because he just walks like crazy. So Dylan Beavers, another guy sort of on my watch list to see if he does sort of win himself a larger role. And that's kind of what my watch list looks like at this stage of the season. I already took the guys who I thought had talent. That's what my draft was for. But I may have left guys off my roster because they didn't have a great opportunity, right? So what I'm going to be looking at is guys who are a step away from an opportunity. That's why I'm talking about guys like Beavers and Keith and things like that. So that's the type of player I think you should be tagging all over your watch list. Your watch list doesn't in April. My watch list does not have a guy like Mickey Moniak. You may stream Mickey Moniak this spring whenever they go to Colorado and play against right-handed pitching, but he doesn't need to be on your watch list because he'll always be there. He'll just be there. Okay. In a 12-team league, Mickey Moniak will always be there for you if you need to scoop some power and he's at home, but you don't touch him any other time. So that's definitely not what I'm after. I'm after guys who, hey, if they're on my watch list, and if I get news like, oh, hey, Tyler O'Neill had a ugly looking crash in the outfield, that's what I'm looking at Dylan Beavers right then. So that's how I'm setting up all of that. So just keep that in mind. Think about if you're trying to figure out your own, think about teams that have like, one spot away, right? Like what, if there's one injury, what's going to happen, right? Where does it all, where does it all come in? That's the Issac Parades, right? Except he's already rostered, so it doesn't work that well for him. But yeah, Colt Keith is, already could be a platoon guy, and there's a path to more, which is something doesn't pan out, someone gets hurt, anything like that. Yeah, that's how I look at this. Cam Smith already has an opportunity, but he's really worth keeping an eye on. Finally, the last watch list guy, because he can cover a lot of positions for you, and I'm curious to see how things change because they move the walls in Kansas City, is Jonathan India, a poor man's Willie Castro, if you will. Jonathan India is not going to blow you away in any particular stat outside of eligibility. But with Jonathan India, again, he'll be eligible at second, outfield, and third base. He had a terrible season last year. And moving in the walls in Kansas City will not turn that place into Great American Ballpark. But that's where India was good, right? He hit 21 home runs his rookie season. He hit 17 in 2023, 15 in 2024, just 9 last season. Part of that because he was in a much bigger ballpark. He didn't steal a single base, which I thought was weird, but the Royals don't run as much as the Reds did back then. But Jonathan India, a guy who can cover a lot of places for you, a guy who, he had an okay spring. I'm not that really concerned about his spring, but if he can go back to being like a 12 to 15 home run guy, especially, in deeper leagues, he's surprisingly useful, like Willie Castro, except you can draft him or you can get him off the waiver wire, whereas Willie Castro is rostered in all those leagues. So I think I've said Willie Castro enough for this podcast, but that's the last guy on my watch list where it's like, I need a guy who can cover a lot of positions. I'm in a deeper league. Jonathan India is the one that I'm keeping an eye on.
I'm going to ask you one more question just because you talked a lot about opportunities and guys who are one injury away or type thing. One of the guys that has come up in the Discord quite a bit this week is Colorado Rockies first baseman TJ Rumfield, a Rule 5 pick that the Rockies selected this offseason. And it looks like he's going to get starting first base reps beginning on opening day. I guess really my question is, should we care?
I mean, guys had a heck of a spring, right? He struck out once this spring, 1.6% strikeout rate. He's always had pretty good plate discipline in the minor leagues. He's been in the minor leagues for quite a while. That's why he was a Rule 5 guy. He's been in the Yankees organization for several years. He had a pretty good year last year for them in AAA, hit 16 home runs, 138 games. Here's the thing. I think Rumfield is fine in a points league, but Brumfield does not have a ton of power here. This is not like a prototypical first baseman, right? Even in the minor leagues, his average exit velocity well below 90 miles per hour, hard hit rate well below 40%, right? Those are two kind of thresholds to be like, hey, yeah, that's a guy who can hit hard. Even in this strong spring, Rumfield has 2 barrels, right? 3.7%. He's not going to hit the ball exceptionally hard. He does hit the ball in the air a little bit, but he's mostly a line drive guy. So what does that mean? That means Rumfield could this could be like a poor man's Nolan Shanuel, who is over in LA. So it's like, low double digits home runs. The counting stats aren't great, but the ratios should be quite strong. I think, especially when he's at home, I think he could hit 300 at home, right? No problem. I don't know how he'll be on the road because it's just hard for anyone to make the adjustments the Rockies have to make going from road to home, but there's enough hit tool here that he could be a 300 hitter on the road or at home with, poor power, no speed, not great counting stats, but a decent streamer for, especially in points leagues at home. And maybe even in a deeper points league, it's just a back end option at like corner infield or something like that. But in a regular 12 teamer, please don't go crazy. There's not enough here. Go get guys. Like there's plenty of guys that can do this that are a lot more proven and that are in better lineups.
Yeah, it's just kind of weird to see the Rockies swing from one side of the spectrum and take the pendulum all the way to the other side of the spectrum, going from Michael Toglia, last year's opening day starting first baseman, to a guy like Rumfield, which kind of profiles almost exact opposite.
Yeah, and actually, like I'm glad I mentioned. It's like Nolan Shanuel is definitely the guy I'd rather have, even though I don't like. There's not some ceiling I haven't seen. A good season for TJ Rumfield. Sorry, for TJ Rumfield is to be Nolan Shanuel, right? That's it. So if they're both available on the wire, do I want the guy who might be as good as the other guy or the guy who is the other guy? Right? Like, not to oversimplify, but I'll take the guy on a slightly better lineup because every lineup is better than that. And Shanuel's going to hit third, right? And like, again, that it's not a great lineup, but he'll be hitting right behind Zach Neto, Mike Trout. There's some RBI to be had there. He's also, he's left-handed. He's not going to have like weird home road splits. Brumfield is left-handed as well, but he'll have the weird home road stuff. So yeah, go take the guy. Like, just because he's won a job, it's going to get him in the news, but Shanuel is what this guy is, except already there and gets to bat third.
Nolan Shanuel, for what it's worth, is available in 90% of ESPN leagues last I looked. So he's very readily available in those shallow leagues. So if you're going to grab one of them,
someone probably took Shanuel. And if you want a poor man Shanuel, it's CJ Rumfield.
Beautiful. Scott, any other names that you want to mention before we sign off?
I think the last name that I've been thinking about, and it's because I'm some kind of masochist, we're going to go back out to Colorado, and I don't want them for the first week. Keep in mind that they do not start at home. They'll spend a week on the road. So no big rush to get these Rockies. But Edouard Julien is a second baseman, first second baseman. I think he's gonna play for this team. I don't think they have a ton of other options anyway. And if I know I talked about this in a prior podcast, but if there is a way for Edouard Julien to succeed, it's a place where the ball don't move so much, because he's got major contact issues. And one of the only ways to resolve contact issues without just being better is make the ball move less. And that's what he's going to get. So that is a name that I've really sort of starred on deep league watch list because he's just not getting drafted. I'm like, hey, you know what? This could be something. There might be enough here that I can get something, especially while he's at home. But at the end of the day, the number one thing I'm watching the first 2 weeks of the season are for dumb drops. Someone's going to make a dumb drop. They're going to think, oh, I can't possibly hold on to this guy because I absolutely have to have the IL spot, and a good player is going to get dropped. That's what I'm watching more than the stat lines even, because there's nothing that can really happen in the first week that makes me change projections or ranks all that much. They'll change a little bit, especially like starting with like 120 and on. That's always like a place that's in flux, but someone's going to drop someone who shouldn't have been dropped. Maybe because they had a bad week.
Like
maybe
Rafael
because
Devers last year.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He got dropped in a few places, and that's like an extreme because he was like a top 30 guy, but even just a little bit lower than that. Like there are guys who, if Joe Adele has a bad 2 weeks, someone's going to cut him, and that's going to be a mistake. Right. Or, like a Jacob Marcy, because like, oh, there's another outfielder who's hot, I'll just go grab him. One, don't be that person. Number two, make sure you punish that person by taking those players whenever possible. So for the first 2 weeks of the season, I'm not saying don't refuse to, don't ignore guys that are starting out hot or whatever, but sort of ignore guys who are starting out hot or whatever. Being hot the first week of the season and being hot the 17th week of the season are not different. There's nothing unique. There's nothing unique about it, except it's easier to see how hot he was for that week. Right. So if someone, if you see like Brandon Lau get cut, scoop him, because that was a bad idea. Don't overreact. And, you can earmark, you're the last couple guys you picked, your last like 3 or 4 picks, the guys on your bench, like go ahead, drop those guys. But man, please don't ask me about dropping a cold starting Luke Keeschel, right? Or, a cold starting, Spencer Torkelson or something like that. No. Unless someone dropped someone legitimately better, right? Don't bother with it. But keep an eye on that wire. Someone's going to make a stupid drop, and you need to be the one who reaps the reward for that.
Beautiful. I love it. Don't be the stupid league mate and punish the stupid league mate. Perfect.
Yeah. Punish them severely by taking that player and beating them with it.
Excellent. Scott, that does it for this week's episode of Hacks and Jacks. Tell the people where to find you and your work.
Over on Twitter, it's at if the Chu fits, if the CHU fits. Over on Blue Sky, it's scottchu.pitcherlist.com. I've been pretty cold on social media lately because I've been just kind of working on my ranks, but I'll be picking all that stuff back up as the season starts. Just to remind people, mostly about, 1 or 2 weeks, not really meaning a whole lot. It is going to be very hard to say someone's doing something they've never done with 1 to 2 week samples. It's the same thing we've talked about with spring training. So I'll be posting a lot of rolling charts to remind people this guy's done this before. He's been this bad. He's been this good, et cetera, for these small samples. So I'll be doing that to try to keep you sane. Hopefully I'll do it enough so that you'll also be like, you know what? Maybe this is just a hot streak. It doesn't mean you can't scoop them. It just means that it doesn't necessarily mean anything yet. You have to act before you know, but you should at least know that this might just be a flash in the pan.
Beautiful. And you can find me, your host, Brett Ford, at Fade That Man on Twitter. I'm active in the Pitcher List Discord and the QB List Discord. Be publishing a under rostered players in points leagues column on a weekly basis this year. That'll be coming out on Mondays. And of course, Hacks and Jacks is on your Hacks and Jacks is Hacks and Jacks podcasts are publishing every Wednesday, starting a couple weeks ago. So we'll catch you guys on Wednesday mornings. And until next time, we'll see you later.